Kia ora, Hoa. Thank you so much for having us today. Could you please introduce yourself?
Kia ora, ko mana nui a kiwa o te awa, ko Mankakiakia te maunga, no Autatahi a hau, ko Lexie Matheson, toko ingoa. That's me.
Kia
That's
ora.
me.
Did you say o Tautahi?
Yeah,
Into your
Christchurch.
home?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. How was it growing up in o Tautahi?
Awful.
Okay.
Because I'm of a generation where my father had been overseas during the Second World War, came back a mess, psychologically and physically. So we lived in a family that was a mixed family because my mother had been married, her first husband had died, and she met my dad just before he went away. And when he came back, I was conceived and born in 1945. So lived with a very damaged dad, who was a fantastic man. He was a lovely human being, but he'd been really beaten about psychologically. So he saw psychiatrists regularly, and we didn't have much. We lived on the wrong side of the Christchurch tracks.
Which side is it?
There was sort of Bromley, North Linwood. So I went to North Linwood Primary
I was going to
School.
say, was it Linwood?
and,
Yeah.
and then to Linwood Intermediate, and then to what was then Linwood High School.
Okay.
And a lot of the teachers that I had were like my dad. You know, they'd come back, they'd done a pressure cooker teaching course. Their idea of classroom management was with the strap or the stick. So I spent most of my primary school and secondary school life terrified.
Yeah.
You know, really, and I did everything wrong. And I was just the naughty kid. And what we know now, and through another part of my journey that we may get to talk about, we may not, I've sort of been identified as being on the spectrum. And people go, "Oh, really? You on the spectrum?" Yeah. But when I went to school, I was just a naughty kid.
Right.
And a lot of the naughty was, I have no idea what's going on around me, and why am I getting beaten? So yeah, it wasn't fun. And of course, when I was 8, I knew who I was.
Yeah, I
As
was going to ask that. When was it? And was it in your childhood where you felt different and you knew
Yep.
because the kids were feeling particular ways or perceiving themselves in particular ways? And yeah, what was that journey like?
I was precocious as a reader, so I read everything that was in the house. And we used to get a magazine called the Australasian Post, which had stories, and it was mainly about Australia, but it had bits at the back like Anna Samway's sort of piece where, there'll be half a dozen lines about something that's really interesting. And we got this magazine one week, and my parents were in the kitchen having dinner, and I was in the lounge reading this magazine, and there, in the back, there was a photograph of Christine Jorgensen. That famous photograph of her coming down from the DC-3, and I looked at that and I read the article and I thought, that's me. I was 8, that's me, and what am I going to do about that? So nothing, because we didn't have the internet, nobody knew anything about it, so I was really, really private about that knowledge that I had about myself, but I stole the magazine and kept it under my bed for ages, and so and I knew from then that this is the reason I feel the way I do. But largely not that my father ever asked me to do this. I tried to find out who I was, my manness, through sport and through doing manly things. So everyone else would, go for a 20-mile run. I'd go for a 100-mile run. I'd run 100 miles in a week just to prove that I was the man that I wanted my father to have as a son, and failed dismally. 8 years in the army. What am I doing? What am I doing? It was completely wrong. But it took a long time to get out of that state of denial about who I was, and some of my behaviours were, totally self-destructive through that period. But eventually, at the age of 50, I went, yep, I know what to do now. There's this thing called the internet that will tell me what to do. So the coming out process happened then, and all the changes started then.
It's so interesting that you say when you saw somebody in that paper, that was when you knew, because that's been quite a point of reference for a lot of people that we've spoken to, saying they've seen something or somebody that's just defined or confirmed exactly who they were as people. And it's particularly our older generation that we look up to didn't have many people to reference, and so they took it any way they could, received it any way they could, and that's such a beautiful beginning.
It was the piece of text that said she'd had gender reassignment surgery, or sex changes they called it in those days. And I thought, that's what I need, that's what I have to have. Because my mother knew, even when I was very little, when my dad was in Hamner having shock treatment and stuff to try and get over this wartime trauma, she dressed me as a girl, called me Sally. So she knew. But when my dad came home, of course, and then when I went to school, the expectation is that I would live and behave in a way that was commensurate with my birth identity. And so it never felt right. Never felt right.
Living in a generation such as that, what was it like being in that body throughout that time? It must have, like you said, you found outlets to rebel, I guess. Like, can you speak to those situations?
That was scary, because I was drawn to our community in as much as it was evident in Christchurch. Christchurch was an incredibly repressed place, and I don't know that it's changed that much. You know, the 51 people killed in the mosque killings, that happened in Christchurch. It wasn't an accident that happened in Christchurch. That Christchurch was the birthplace for that sort of behaviour, and it was the birthplace for the trauma around Peter Ellis, for example. And before that, if you were gay or a homo or a faggot in Christchurch, you were, on the absolute outside. So I suppose I craved acceptance, and I knew that I was never going to get accepted in the communities that I was functioning in, which were largely sporting communities, by being who I really was. So I just denied it. And
sport, you say sport played a major role in your young life. What and sport back then was particularly binary as well. How do you navigate live in that sort of world? Is it uncomfortable to have played a sport in a particular way or with a particular team? What was those experiences like?
Complex. Greg McGee wrote a play called Foreskin's Lament, and when that came out, of course, it was at the end of my playing time, but I read that play and thought, I'm Foreskin. I'm what Natalie Cook from Australia, who's running the next Commonwealth Games and Olympics in Australia, said a week or so ago, an athlete with a brain. And that was me. I was the athlete with the brain, who didn't respond and didn't enjoy the don't bend down and pick up the soap in the showers jokes that were prevalent. So I kept myself separate from that. But it was sort of accepted, but it wasn't accepted that I was gay. It wasn't accepted that I was transgender. It was just accepted that I was different because I was a good enough player. Lexie's fast. She's really fast, and she scores tries and things. So we all love her, and we take her to the pub, even though she's only 15. We do that. We look after this person. So there was that, the sense that I was accepted and looked after. But the other side of that was, the guys I'm playing rugby with, they've got a collective IQ of about 15, and I'm slightly more than that. So hopefully most of them are dead now. So I'm not going to get sort of tweeted to hell over that. So it was really complex, because part of me just was drawn to the queer community. And when I started teaching, when I graduated from that and started work, I was generally seen as the future as a teacher. The inspectors all thought I was great, and were prepared to just not prepared to overlook my bad behaviour, like dyeing my hair green and things like that. They were happy to do that. But I would often come to Auckland, be sent to Auckland for courses, and go out to Lopdale House, and all the guys who were on the course would go into a strip club, and I would somehow get lost from the group, and I'd end up at Mojo's or Elfie's, and knowing that these are my people, but what does that mean? What does that even mean? So it took a long time to find my way into my community, because the community wasn't welcoming. The community wasn't going to go, well, this person's been in the army for 8 years, so let's drag them in and accept them. That was not accepting either. But I wasn't available to be accepted. So there was this complication. Okay, these are my people, this is where I want to be, but I can't be. I have to be over here because this is my career and this is what my whānau is like, and I've got kids and I've got to behave. This whole thing about having to behave.
With all the suffering that comes with pain, about sport aside, I know this to be true. Sport is something that is such a great aid for you. What does it feel like to play sport? And how does it feel to be able to play sport? Is it something that you...
What, you mean back then or now?
Anytime.
Well, back then it was scary.
Yeah.
You know, it was really scary because, rugby's a brutal game, and it's a little bit more civilised now than it used to be. And cricket was, cricket was cricket. It's, you had to stiff upper lip, and it's all very English. And to some extent, I know that I engaged in those sports to try and prove something to my dad, who my dad never asked me to do. But that was sort of to have, because my dad was a sportsman, and there was a vague expectation that I would go down that path as well. The interesting thing with my family now, and I've got a son who's a professional sports person, hasn't played any of the sports I played when I was young. He's made his own decisions about what sports he plays, and I wonder if those sports or similar sports to that were available when I was young, I might have played something else. But my family said rugby and cricket. That's what you play, rugby and cricket. If you want to be a real man, rugby and cricket. So I succeeded at rugby and cricket, but I failed at being a real man.
I was the complete opposite. When I was a young child, I played rugby for, I'm pretty sure it was 2 years, and I say this all the time, I had all the makings to be an All Black, but I didn't have the talent at all.
Everything else was
like
there.
I could have as a child. So a lot of people are transitioning now in their 20s, early 20s, some potentially even earlier than that, where you transitioned at the beautiful age of 53. How does that make you feel that people are able to just be able to access it so early now, compared to maybe being suppressed at a time when there was no real dialogue for it?
I'm excited for them, and I don't feel any resentment. And I've got the potential to be resentful as same as anybody's got, but I don't feel resentful about that. I just feel really excited for them, and every now and again I think, what would it have been like if I had been able to come out when I was 20, if that had been an environment. But it wasn't. It was when I was, 50, early 50s, and relationship broken up, living alone in an apartment thinking, I'm going to do this. But that's going to be my life from now on. I will be living alone in an apartment because who could love someone like this? And then I met Kushla, of course, and I found someone who could love someone like this, who just, in our journey, she's made discoveries about herself as well. And so that, to me, that's for me, the best thing that could possibly have happened is that level of acceptance, being able to live in an environment, in a family, where there is love and laughter, and acceptance, and you'll talk to Finn, and you'll get his side of that story about having two parents, same-sex parents, but both of whom are his biological parents. Now that's really rare. That's really rare. And kids
How
aren't.
does he feel about it? From your perspective?
From my perspective, he's very proud of that. Kids at school used to say, "Have you got two mums?" And he'd go, "Yeah." "Well, what's it like having two mums?" "Well, I don't know anything else. That's all I've ever had." So, and he's quite an advocate in that respect. Kids would say, they'll ask those questions, and then he'd say, "Why are you asking?" "Oh, it's just that I've got two mums and they never want to come down to school together because they don't want people to know. So it's okay for you." And I go, "Yeah, well, my parents are, impervious to criticism. They just sort of, wherever I am, they come and hang out." So he does his own advocacy amongst his own tribe.
That's a beautiful thing, nurturing your child to be accepting and tolerant, because we know for sure that that's not a case in so many households, as we've found, particularly in the most recent weeks. We'll talk about that eventually, but can we speak on your transition then?
Yep.
In 1998,
Yep.
correct?
Yep.
What was that journey like for you at that time?
Exciting, scary. I just assumed that if I came out and was public about coming out, because I couldn't conceive of not being public. If I want to live in the world, then people have to know who I am. And I expected to get incredible pushback. But I was in a situation where I had a life-threatening illness, at the end of which I went, "I've got to sort my life out, and get a counsellor." And I've never believed in counselling. I've always thought you've got to be able to deal with it yourself. You've got to sort it out for yourself. Well, I'd had 50 years of not sorting it out, so a counsellor seemed like a good idea. And I found someone my GP found someone for me. This was to deal with sexual abuse in my childhood, which I thought was the reason that my behaviours were so self-destructive. And when I talked to the counsellor, we got through that bit really quickly, and suddenly all of that power that sexual abuse had over me had gone. The sexual abuse hadn't gone, the memories hadn't gone, but the power it had over me had gone. And I remember sitting in his room, and he said, "I think there's something else." And I go, "Oh, thanks. I really do need something else." And so he said, "Well, do you mind if we sort of play a little game?" And I went, "Okay." So he had two chairs, and my cross-dressing character was to sit in one chair, and my male persona was to sit in the other chair, and they'd talk to each other. Which was, I thought, "Oh, bloody theatre games, I've been doing these all my life. What am I doing this for?" And at the end of it, he said, which was the real you?" And I went, "Her." And I went, "Okay, I've got to go and do some research." So he went and did some research, and so did I. And at that point, it became, you transition now, or you never will.
Right.
And so, the powerful desire to be who I really was. I hadn't had a suicidal thought since I'd been going to this guy, which is extraordinary because I'd lived with those, all my life. And suddenly they're not there, but suddenly I know who I am as well. So that, we have to make that work. So that was at the heart of the transition, the relationship I was in at that time when I made the stupid mistake of going home and telling her what I'd just, having been told, "Don't, this is too big a journey for somebody. You've had 6 weeks of this, she's had none, and you've got to go home and say, 'Hey, I'm just going to transition my gender.'" And she went, "Well, that's us gone." And I went, "Why?" And she said, "Because I'm not a lesbian." Oh, okay, I never thought about that. Never thought about that bit. But the relationship was pretty rocky anyway, so that was when I ended up sort of living on my own.
Yeah.
But the transition was terrifying.
Yeah.
You know, I put the clothes on that I liked and thought I looked good in, and I went to a party, and I never even got in the door. You know, the sense that I was going to be judged as I walked through that door was so powerful that I went home to my 14th floor flat, and I sat on the balcony and was ready to go off. It was touch and go. And the phone went, and it was a friend saying, "What are you doing? You know, you were supposed to come to the party and you didn't." And so I got down off the balcony and I went inside, and I thought, well, I've got to deal with this. And so I did. And what I found was, instead of this massive amount of judgment from everybody, that, you know, the minute I walked out the door, there'd be people going, ha, 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 you know, you're not real, you're not authentic. Actually, what I found was that most people couldn't have given a stuff.
Yeah.
You know, they just went, oh yeah. They either went, yeah, oh, that's Lexie, and we accept that, or we don't want to be your friend anymore. So I lost friends, but I gained a whole lot of other friends. I gained a whole family of friends.
Yeah.
And that was sort of what happened with Kushla too, when I've had to sort of confront this, because I'd only just started my transition when we started to see each other. And I had to go, well, I can't go any further in this relationship without telling her. And there was already 30 years difference in our age. She was a good Catholic girl, and you know, there were all the signs of, this is why it's going to fall over. No, it'll fall over for this reason. Oh, okay, there's the transgender thing as well. So I did. I told her, and you know, she just looked at me sort of confused and said, "Do you want pizza?" And when you tell the story, it sounds sort of glib, but it was like she was saying, "Well, yeah, I knew there was something, but I don't really care."
Yeah.
And
It's
that,
always those ones, those small monumental moments that you remember, because it just gives you that massive tag of like, this person just gets it and still loves me anyway.
Yeah, that's right. And how can you love me in a way I don't love me?
Yeah.
You know, how does that play out?
Yeah.
And of course, then when we went through the exercise of me becoming a Catholic, which didn't last that long, getting married, which has lasted 22 years, and you know, then of course I've got another family. I've got a new family. I've got her family, who are good Christian people from Cambridge. And our wedding was extraordinary because it had the cathedral. The Queen has to get married in a cathedral.
Of course.
Of course. So there was the family side, which was Waikato farmers, and there was the family side, which was all drag queens and big hats and high shoes and stuff. And we thought, how's this going to play out at the reception? It was just so funny because, we had a couple of drag queens that gave us, their gift to us was, we'll do a performance at your reception. And they just played up to the farmers and the Waikato people who loved it. So suddenly there was a melding of these two families. But then I had to find my way, and more importantly, the family had to find their way into accepting me. Yeah. And they weren't ready for that. Yeah. And it was unfair to expect them to be ready for that. Yeah. I knew who I was, I knew where I was going, but they didn't ask for that. Yeah. So there were 5 years of challenges around that, which were all resolved at Sylvia Park one day. Kushla's mum came up, and I always stood to butch up. And Kushla went, no, you're not doing that this weekend. She's going to find us living how we live. And so on the Friday night, Kushla's mum and I sat in the lounge and we talked about religion, as you do. What are the forbidden subjects? Let's talk about religion. And she was quite impressed by the fact that I knew a lot about theology, and I was really impressed by the fact that she had simple faith. Now, I didn't have that, and she didn't have the knowledge about it, but, we sort of was okay. And then on the Saturday, we went to Sylvia Park, and it was really tense. She didn't want to be there, and I didn't want to be there, and it was really uncomfortable. So I took Finn off to the toilet. That's the sort of, okay, son, you want to go to the toilet? No, yes, you do. So we went off to the bathroom. We came back. They were sitting outside Easy Buy shop. And of course they said, oh, you wanted to go and get some clothes, the bigger girl clothes. And I went, yeah, that's right. And I said to Lorraine, of course, mum, would you like to come in as well? And she went, no. And got all tight-lipped on it. So I went in and we bought some clothes and came out. And she said, oh, did you buy something? In this totally judgmental fashion. And I went, yeah, I bought this blouse. And she went, I've got one like that. And I said, but I got a blue one as well. And she went, so have I. And Kushla just stood there and went, oh, fuck, I've married my mother. And from then on, Lorraine and I have been best friends. You know, it was all it took was that moment of humour and that moment of silliness. Yeah, for us both to go, actually, I like you. You're a very cool person.
Yeah.
And that was part of that, how that journey played out. Yeah. And over the years, as real acceptance has happened, and I love my Cambridge family. You know, they're extraordinary people. I wouldn't swap them for the world. But we had to walk the walk together. Yeah. And I can't speak highly enough for them, because they came to live in my world for those moments. No, it's good. It's good.
Before your transition, you were also big in the arts sector, being an actor and a director, and I'm sure so much more, writing, so much. Coming through to your transition, the work just stopped, as you spoke of. What was it like? What was the industry like back then at that time?
Superficially accepting. You know, right from when I started back in the mid-70s, tremendous acceptance within the industry for gay men, and also for lesbian women, although the women tended not to be quite so out. But there were no trans women at all. And eventually there was one woman who went away, came back after a couple of years overseas and came back as her real self. But she wasn't regularly in the industry. She got bits of work before she went, and she got bits of work when she came back. Yeah. But I had years and years and years of sort of end-on work. And you're right, it's what do you do to keep a career going? You teach, you write your own stuff, because that's sort of, we're all driven to do that. Yeah. And you do the traditional Shakespeares and things like that, you do all that. But to suddenly go from being fully employed, one of the rare creatures in our industry who had been fully employed for over 30 years, to suddenly going, it's all gone, there's nothing. What am I going to do now? And that was where, talking to my agent, she said, I don't think I could get you work as your authentic self. And, she's accepted who I was. And that's what had happened. I think I had 3 auditions for transgender parts in New Zealand television series like the West Auckland, I can't remember what it's called, but, that show. And those roles all went to cisgendered women. Yes. Yeah. And so in the end I went, well, I've got to go and get a real job. So...
Sorry, can I just pause for a second? Just to
yeah.
Go over, because this is important.
Yeah, I think we might be on a... sort of... We're okay apart from that? Yeah, okay. So that was just, do you want me to pick that up, or do you want to? Yeah, okay. So I thought I'd have to go and get a real job. And I registered for the Dole for the first time in my life, and that was horrifying because there was such a bunch of assholes there. And they said, you have to apply for 4,000 jobs a week, and if you don't get one, we'll take your money off you. And all I wanted to do was just get a job and keep doing what I'd been, because they didn't recognise acting as a job.
No, they
you're a trained teacher, you can go and teach. Yeah. And it was always about going back to teaching. I don't feel like going back was a good idea. So anyway, that played out for a while, and I was mucking around trying to find jobs, and a position came up at the University of Auckland as a business manager for the Maiden Theatre, and I thought, oh, at least that's a theatre job. Yeah. So amongst the 20 jobs that I applied for that week, that was one of them. So I got an interview, and I sort of trucked on up to the Maidment, and who was the artistic director at the Maidment but Paul Menifee, who'd been a director of mine in a number of different iterations of my career, and he employed me as the business manager of Maidment Theatre. I was there for 8 years.
Contacts, eh?
Yeah,
Contacts
and we,
always work.
yep, and he trusted me, and I trusted him. Still do implicitly. Fantastic human being. So I had that privilege of being able to work there, and he encouraged me to do some study, which I'd given up on in 1966. I think I decided I was not going to be an academic. But I found out I really loved it, and I
was going to say, I don't think that stuck around.
No, that's right. So I completed a master's with honours, and then the job at AUT came up, and I got that. So I then transitioned again from being an administrative staff member at the University of Auckland to being an academic at AUT, and all the salary jump that went with that. So and they were in the early years. They were good years at AUT. There was a level of acceptance that feels like it's gone a bit. You know, there was an understanding that diversity included us, that it included the gay community, and there were some transgender academics there as well, because we tend to be high achievers, because we're constantly trying to prove ourselves in whatever environment we're in. And that's gone to a degree now. We've gone, diversity is now the colour of your skin and your ethnicity, rather than the broader understanding of what equity is. That's just my understanding and my feeling about it. Big changes around the time, and I've got so much to thank Paul Menifee for, because those years at the Maidment were extraordinary.
I kind of had the same. Well, it's always the fear that you're never going to work again after your last job. I just relate so much to what you said. I was told by a few people, if you transition now, you'll miss out on all of this. So why don't you stay in the middle and be either side? And I just went, no, that's not how I'm going to do things. So seeing this industry flourish into what it is now, where I think people like yourself paved the way for people like me to be able to continue on with a career. I just firstly want to thank you for the hard work that you did, putting it in, and I know it's never easy.
We had no idea what we were doing. All we knew was that something needed to be done, and you have to go and stand in the front. You know, I always tell my students, you want to know what it's like to be knocked down by a bus, stand in the middle of the road. You're not going to find that information standing on a footpath, which is what you're talking about. Getting out there, getting your skin in the game. Yes, there were. I think there have been a lot of us internationally. There are, the Laverne Coxes and people like that who, and they've made it possible. And there's still a risk, even hiring a gay man. That you think, if this closeted gay man, if suddenly his life turns to custard, what's going to happen to our movie, or what's going to happen to our piece of theatre? If people find out he's gay, we still live in that world of what happens if they find out. I always felt that for me, the best way of people finding out is for me to tell them, this is who I am. And if you like it, that's cool. I'll be respectful of your views. I want you to be respectful of my views and of who I am. But I'm not going to suddenly, hide. I did that, and it didn't work. That way there's addiction and there's all sorts of things down that path, which suddenly disappear. I think that was the thing in my transition that was the most extraordinary, that all of the self-destructive sexual behaviours, how I didn't get AIDS, I have no idea. But, all of those behaviours that are closeted, the cross-dresser, the secret cross-dresser, the not telling your family, all that stuff, it just went. Literally overnight, went, I'm not driven to do that anymore. That's extraordinarily powerful. Finding yourself, I guess.
So, two questions in one. What has been the most difficult part of your journey, and where has your past led you to get you to today?
So the key moments for me, and there have been a number of them, and meeting Kushla was one, and I was directing a piece called, I can't remember what it was called, but it was a celebration of 150 years of the Wellington Archdiocese of the Catholic Church. And they wanted us to do this big pageant, and Father Bruce Goodman, who was a friend of mine and I'd worked with a lot, wrote this piece called, I think it was Unsung Voyages, I think it was called, and Kushla was the first person who walked through the door to audition. And I went, wow, if they're all like this, because she was actor trained, and I thought this is going to be great. And so we, over a period of 3 months, only meeting on the weekends, we gradually formed this bond. That was really, really important. And then she decided to come and live in Auckland, and flat with a dancer friend. And she actually didn't. I think she went there twice and just paid the rent and came and lived at my place. And we found that we had a real affinity, that there was a kindness, and she was able to cope with the challenges of the up and down nature of gender dysphoria, and she probably gave me the best bit of advice. You start taking the hormones and you get get everything sort of in line and everything's great, and you go, but what happened to my girlhood? I never had a girlhood. So what am I going to do? And I remember saying to her, this is really difficult, because it's like there's this great gap in my life. And she went, make it up. It's what most of us do. And I thought, okay, I can do that. So what I did was, I took my journey as Lex, male Lex, and made that person my best friend growing up. So we had the same experiences, but I had those experiences through a feminine mind, and it worked. And then I went, stop worrying about that now. And then she said, I can't wait until you've been taking hormones for longer than 6 months, because I'm sick of living with a teenager. So there were those moments. But there was another moment, of course. We then, having decided to get married, we then had to have that big moment of, we're going to have children. And I said, well, I've got 3, and I'm quite happy if we don't have any more. They've all grown up, and I would quite like to have the next part of my life sort of with you rather than with children. And she mucked it up.
Sorry. Really are all out today.
Yeah, that's... I thought we got rid of the hammering and the banging downstairs.
Yeah, sorry if you could continue.
Yep. We had to have that difficult conversation about, whether we were going to have a family, children, because she was 25, I was 55. It was still possible because I was still an intact male at that stage. And I said, well, I've got 3 kids, and I don't mind if we don't. And she said, threw the cat among the pigeons, said, I'd quite like to have 1 child. So we decided, I went for a moment, but I'm fortunately, yeah, I'm one of, he's heard this. I'm one of those people, if you make a challenge, I'll initially go, I don't want to do that. But very, very quickly I'll go, yeah, why not? Why shouldn't we do that? Why don't we do that? And it seemed wrong to deny her the right to be a mother, because that's what she wanted to do. So we got married, and for the weeks beforehand we're just ridiculously bloody busy and stuff, so there hadn't been a lot of action happening. I don't think she'll mind me saying this, because it did come up with her mum at a later date. So we decided that I went through the process of, do I want to, and I thought, no, let's do it. She wants to do that, and that's fair enough to do that. So the wedding day came, and we had the drag queens and we had the Waikato farmers, and it was a fantastic experience, that the wedding day. And at the end of it, I had booked a restaurant for just us, just the two of us. We were going to have our wedding night supper together at a Ponsonby restaurant. And we were just getting ready to leave the Maidment, because Paul had said, my wedding present to you is you can use the theatre for your reception. Just getting ready to leave, and Kushla's sister came back and went, our car's been stolen. And she's there with two little kids and a husband and no vehicle, and they were from Ekatahuna, somewhere out of Palmerston North. They were living a long way away with these two little kids. So Kushla, being Kushla, the organiser, she phoned insurance companies and she did all that stuff, and then she found them accommodation for the evening, and we went to the accommodation and got them settled there. And then we went, well, it's nearly midnight now. Forget about going out for dinner. So we went to Greenland McDonald's and got some food. And we went home and made a baby. Finn is a wedding night baby. Yeah, that's right. It's all the McDonald's. So he's a wedding night baby, which is something that I think is great, because he only just made it. The transition then took precedence. But that was, that's so you look at things in your life and you think, well, that was prescient. The fact that we agreed we wanted to have a baby and we had one pretty well straight away. So that was a key moment. Another key moment, which is the opposite, if you're looking at both sides of the coin, was I was doing my master's at the time. I was doing 2 papers full time. I was working full time, and I had a new baby. And my responsibility for the baby was to look after him during the night, so that as he wakes up and he cries, and I go and get him and clean him up and give him to Kushla to feed him. And I was exhausted. And she said, well, why don't you go to the doctor and get some sleeping pills? She said, I can look after the baby at night. You don't have to do that. So I went to my GP. It was great. And I was on all the hormone replacements and testosterone blockers and stuff. So he went through the exercise of making sure that what he was giving me wasn't going to conflict with the stuff that I was already taking. So he gave me fluoxetine hydrochloride, and I had a psychotic break. And that was hideous. Straight into the self-harm, straight into the suicide ideation, straight into the violence. All of those things that you take those pills to get rid of, not to amplify. And so, life became very ugly. I'd go to work, I'd come home, the first thing I'd do is get out the craft knife and hack myself to pieces. And it was ugly. And Kushla left me for a day. But that was a really complex time for us, because somebody advised her, go and get a protection order from me. And she thought that was going to be a really good thing to do, because it would give us the opportunity to get back together again and to keep the marriage going. But that's not how protection orders work. So I was instructed by the court to do a 12-week men's anger management course. So you can send a newly out transgender woman to spend 12 weeks with a whole lot of angry men. And then the courts would not accept that was probably not a good idea. So especially somebody who's in the middle of a psychotic break. So that was ugly. I went to the first one. It was awful. No, I'm not going back. And the guy said, if you don't come back, you do 3 months in jail. It was brutal stuff. Yeah. So I left and I walked down from where it was down to the overbridge, over the motorway, and I just got up on the railing of the overbridge, and I was just going to go off. And I know that from other experiences that I've had with other people talking about this particular drug, that's exactly what happened to them. But they had worse experiences than mine. Kushla couldn't find me. She didn't know where I was. And she found me. She went to where this anger management course was being held, and I wasn't there. So she just drove back on the natural journey to where, and she found me. So that was really lucky, and I never went back. I thought, no, I'm going to fight this one. But we got through that, and eventually it was really odd. I had a friend phone and say, how are you? And I went, not good. Oh, really? Has the sun not come out? She said, no. I went, no. She said, go back to your GP, you're on the wrong medication. And I was just about to do that, and I went home that night, and in all these mailboxes in the apartment building we were in, there was a Time magazine in the wrong box. It was in our box. So I took I thought, it's just been wrongly delivered. I will read the Time magazine. So I went upstairs and I ripped the plastic off it. And there was an article from Brisbane of a woman who was on this same medication cooking. She said, I was just standing at the bench cutting up vegetables, and I started to cut myself. And I went, shit, that's my story. So I took that and I went back to my GP and said, this is what's happened. And they didn't know, and they were dishing these drugs out to students who were stressed for exams, and they just stopped straight away. And I've just done some recent research on the effects of that drug. I've got 2 friends who lost teenage kids who were prescribed that, and within 8 days, in one instance, this perfectly okay boy who needed some medicating took his own life, and a girl too. And you go, wow, this is awful stuff. So that was, and then you don't just come off it. There's a half-life and a quarter life of that drug. So I eventually got off that. Yep, still got all the scars, and so that was something that I would never want to go through again. But in the same breath, I'm glad I did, because that's part of that journey. But that's, when you hit rock bottom, that for me, that was rock bottom, when I was harming my family and harming myself, and having my boss say, are you okay? As I've just been into the bathroom and the bathroom floor is covered in blood. Is that yours? And me going, yeah, sorry. And having to, to deal with that stuff that some people deal with all day, every day. Through that, stronger as a result.
You're definitely a survivor.
Yeah, lucky.
And luckily,
Yeah.
But pulled yourself through.
Yeah.
And was able to save yourself. I guess Kush as well, helping you save yourself as well.
And saving this marriage so that this boy didn't grow up with one parent. And, he's a lifesaver too in his own way. Fabulous young man.
We'll talk more about your beautiful whānau. Thank you for that, Kōrero.
It's all right.
Thank you. Oh, that's heavy stuff.
So they were dishing this stuff out like candy. And they had no idea, because, the whole thing about medication like that is you look at side effects and you find out that the side effects, might make you sweat a lot, and it might make you have difficulty sleeping, and it might make you have diarrhea. But it doesn't tell you what the psychological effects are, because they can't be measured. So they never put those in the pharmacopoeias. They never put those in there.
Yeah. Thank you for that. We're going to move on to some of your advocacy. So you're a strong advocate for trans people in sport at any level. Please speak to that, because it's something that's been threatened. Well, we've been threatened for it to be taken away in this current climate.
It's an interesting conversation, because it doesn't have a lot of rational or scientific basis what a lot of the sports are doing. And what we've got here and the reason I got involved was simply because I was still an active sports person. And I could see what was happening in the sports that I was involved with, what was happening to transgender people who would come along and they would shoot arrows, or they would fight, or they would do all the things that we do, and then they'd disappear. because the welcome mat wasn't out. The door wasn't closed, and you know what New Zealanders are like. You know, they go, oh, but we really accepted that person. We really liked that person. Why are they not coming anymore? Because you never told them. We need to be told. You know, it's a matter of, you know, okay, inclusion isn't just a matter of saying the door's open, come inside, there's a rainbow on the wall, and you're welcome. You know, you don't go in. We don't go and seek out those moments. Those moments have to be made available to us, because that's what being a minority in any community is all about. And it's just idiots like me and you who are prepared to go, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to walk into this space, and I'm going to be respectful and kind and thoughtful. I'm going to do all those things, and you are going to get to know me as a transgender person, that I am not a threat to you for any reason. And sometimes that works, and sometimes the next week it's hard to get out of bed in the morning. It's just how it is. But what's happened in Aotearoa is that Sport New Zealand, who look after sport at a community level, have now got protocols for transgender inclusion at all levels of community sport. And I was part of the consultative, you know, quite a lot of us were consulted about that, and I went to all the webinars and I went to all of them. And I was really impressed, because Sport New Zealand's attitude to inclusion is, inclusion means everyone. It doesn't mean everyone except Maori, or everyone except transgender people, or gay men. It doesn't mean that. Inclusion means everybody. So our sports right across New Zealand at community level are required by Sport New Zealand and all their funding and all the resources that they've got to be inclusive, find ways to be inclusive. And then you get to the next level up, where you get international sport. And in 2021, the Olympic Committee decided they weren't going to make any decisions about transgender people. Thanks a lot. That's really unhelpful.
Yeah.
They were going to leave it to the national sporting bodies. So we've now got athletics going, we don't want transgender people, and we don't want women with high levels of testosterone occurring naturally. We don't want them competing in our sport. And swimming saying the same thing. And I believe from an article I read last night that Taekwondo have just done the same thing. No scientific basis for this. It's just men big and strong, women small and weak.
Yeah.
And that's not a set of criteria on which you can base fear-based reasons for not allowing people to be involved in sport. So I'm on the World Archery Gender Equity Committee, and World Archery are struggling at the moment with what they're going to do with transgender athletes, and they're doing a really, really good job of being responsible about that, trying to get the science sorted. Other sporting bodies, not so much. I get consulted quite often by international sporting organisations, saying, well, "How do you've done it? What do we have to do to get people like you competing in our sport?" And they want it. They want to be able to do it, and they want to be able to do it rationally. We don't hear from those sports. You know, rugby, for example, their equality and inclusion manager is a transgender woman. Now, this is Rugby New Zealand. You know, what have they got trannies in their team for? And she's fantastic. Well, you know, Judy, she's fantastic. So that's happening at an international level. But all we ever hear is the pinnacles of the Dave Gerrard saying we don't want transgender women in our swimming pools, and Sebastian Coe saying we don't want transgender women on our tracks. But worse, we don't want cisgender women with naturally occurring testosterone above 10 nanomoles or whatever it is. We don't want them in our sport either. So it's a journey that at the absolute top level, there's some really, really good thinking happening. At community level, there's some instructive stuff. You know, you're talking about community. and that's got every sort of mad person that you can possibly think of there. So having Sport New Zealand say, no, this is what you have to do if you want to get your funding and you want to be kosher, this is what you have to do. So I'm active in both of those spaces.
Why is it so hard to tap into the middle? Because I've read that quote. We can break barriers at the top and the bottom, but the middle is proving to be quite difficult.
Bigotry.
Why is that?
Simple bigotry. Simple, you know, I always say it's man big and strong, woman small and weak. And that's basic. It's not much more to it than that. People who will not read the science, people who do not want to go down the path of saying, you know, the big thing at the moment is if you've had a male puberty, then you can't compete in women's sport because you've got these big, you know, big shoulders and big muscles. And, you know, I walked into a high performance sport, their performance summit a couple of weeks ago, and I followed Val Adams in. Now she's a big unit, you know, she's 7 inches or something taller than me, and she's slimmed down, but she's a big unit. And, you know, you look at those shot putters, discus women, they are big, strong women. They're as big as the men. Laurel Hubbard with the weightlifting at the Olympics. They very, very carefully, when they filmed her, never filmed her with her competitors, who are all bigger than she is. Bigger, stronger than she is. It's why she didn't, you know. And so what we do is we get a media-driven picture of unfairness and imbalance based around a misconception that that's what transgender women are like, that we are big and strong and we just want to go and win all the medals, and so that's why we put on a dress. So, but you talk to people about it. You know, I talked to a guy from Swimming New Zealand at this high performance conference, and he said, "Oh, but there was that woman in the States who changed her gender so she could be selected for the Olympics, so she could go and win a medal." I said, "That's utter rubbish. That's a myth. That is so not true. That didn't happen." "Oh, but that's what I heard." "Yeah, well, you heard it wrong. Go back and listen again." Then you go down the path of saying to them, can you imagine somebody like yourself, him, like yourself, actually going and having gender reassignment surgery and putting on a dress and taking hormones and taking testosterone blockers for years just so you might be selected to the Olympics, and if you get there you might win a medal? And he went, "Oh, I hadn't thought of it like that." No, but you've got to unpack what this is like, going into bathrooms, you know, this terrible thing about us going into women's bathrooms. You know, what do we go into women's bathrooms and we just examine each other's genitals? No, of course we don't. We go in and we shut a door and we have a pee and we go and wash our hands, have a chat at the hand basin, and it's totally non-threatening. I've been doing it for 30 years, and I've had some really lovely conversations at the hand basin about children and, you know, what's work like today and how's the weather. I've never had an issue.
These people kind of, or just with this whole weekend, gone base their facts on horror stories that they have heard or received, not really looking at the fine print of those scenarios. Let's speak to it. This weekend, Posey Parker tried to come into New Zealand and speak her rhetoric about letting women speak. I personally am happy, I'm more than happy to let women speak, but probably not on the backs of trans people and trying to annihilate and diminish our existence. Where were you placed in this corridor that's been happening in the past couple of weeks?
It's been happening the last couple of weeks in our media, and it's all over the media.
It's been happening forever. But it's really hit the hot topic currently. Where are you at in that space?
Where I am is weird, because I don't care. You know, she'll be gone now. She'll be gone in 2 days, and we won't be having this conversation anymore. It won't mean that there will be any less UK TERFs in my Twitter feed, because what she was saying and what she was implying, you know, Annie O'Brien's another one. You know, as long as you perpetuate the idea that trans women are men, and that because they are men, they're responsible for all the raping and sexual assault and domestic violence in the world, as long as you do that and don't look at the data, and the data says it's never happened, we don't have trans women, you know, abusing the privilege of being in women's spaces. We don't have that. We understand the importance of those spaces to women, and women in the main understand how important it is for us to have access to our safe spaces as well. And so they go, come in, you know, come and be part of this. You know, trans women are women. The only way Posey Parker can survive is by breaking that idea down into trans women are not women, they are men, and as men they've got male violence patterns that you can't, you know, that hormone replacement or gender reassignment surgery doesn't change. Well, those of us who've been there know it does. And so to some extent she doesn't matter. As I think I said to you before, I didn't go to the protest. I thought there was going to be thousands of people there. All of our allies will be there, and most of my girlfriends are not going anyway. So I reviewed a play, and I walked out of Q Theatre, and what did I walk right into? A Destiny Church protest on the same basic topic in Aotea Square. And I was accosted by 12-year-old boys with signs saying, "Stop sexualizing our children." You know, the drag queens and the drag queen story hours and stuff. It's all based on myths, and these kids were in my face with these, and my family's face with these things. And I thought, what's Auckland Council doing? You've given permission to Posey Parker to be in Albert Park with her hate speech, and now you've given, on exactly the same day, at exactly the same time, you've given Brian Tamaki and Destiny Church the opportunity to be in Aotea Square, 5 minutes from Albert Park, to do exactly the same thing. What are you doing? Is anybody actually thinking these things working together? Of course they were. Of course they were, and the rhetoric's the same. But ultimately, I guess it's a cop-out from my point of view. I just went, well, she'll be gone in 2 days. The media will have a field day. I'll have a crap time in my, you know, in my the reckons that are coming into my social media, and it won't be much fun because everyone will want to talk about it. And that's what happened. I was at a sports tournament on Sunday, and women who I know really well have come up and said, "What's this all about? You know, are you okay? First of all, what's this all about? Who is this person?" And it ends up again with, "Are you okay?" You know, and okay, yeah, but the thing is, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to spend my life talking to my friends about whether I'm safe or not because of the things that are happening in my community. And I am 30 years sick of talking to people about my genitals. You know, I'm over that big time. And I think we have got past. It used to be that, "Hi, you Lexie, how are you? Have you had gender reassignment surgery?" I just get around that by saying, "Are you circumcised?" You can't ask me that.
Exactly.
Well, just what have you asked me? And then they go, "Oh, I see. Ha ha ha." You have a laugh and you're friends again. So yeah, it wears us down. And the thing about allyship that people often forget is that our allies come down and they go, yes, we're all there with our pink and blue flags, and we're on your side, and thank God they are. They're fabulous. They're really good. And at the end of that, they go home, they sit down, they watch the rugby, they have a glass of wine, and that's their life. Their allyship lasts that long every time they think we need them, and that's great. But I go home, I can't shed who I am. I can't suddenly stop being who I am or stop being affected by all that stuff. And why are our suicide rates so high? They're high because these attacks are relentless. They just don't stop. You referred to that before. They just don't stop. It's been going on for years, and it's getting worse.
Yeah. I think I left that day. I feel like my feelings were exactly like yours. I left that day because I attended. I left that day thinking, wow, this community is amazing. Our community really went to bat for us. But then I was at home and I was alone, and I just remember crying into my pillow because I was just like, what happens now? What's going to happen now? Am I going to be safe walking down the street now, knowing that this might happen to me? Like, I've kind of lived in a life of being able to just chuck that away, but for the briefest of times after what happened this weekend, I had to go, am I going to be okay? And I completely relate to, people can go home and just go back to their normal lives, but trans people cannot go back to their normal lives. What happened, what a lot of us went through was very traumatic, and so to be able to go back to our normal lives, we're always then going to constantly be a little bit fearful. So I completely relate and agree with you. Who can we turn to in those moments, or who have you turned to in those moments of feeling that way? I think I might know your answer.
I've got within my family.
Yeah.
Within my family, within my Briga whānau, of people who are supportive of simply going down to Cambridge and spending time with Kushta's parents who are the same age as me. And we talk about, Lorraine talks about what's happened at church, and Larry talks about what's happened in his clubs that he takes part in. Isn't the garden looking lovely? And we talk about that sort of stuff, which is a sort of a respite for a moment, but it is only for a moment, because we go back to our lives. We don't go, oh, that's lovely talk about the gardens, why don't we go out and look at some gardens? We don't do that. It's relentless, and we can't shed it. We can't get away from it. Where do I go? Family. I've had a lot of support over the years politically, and that's all gone. If you think back to 2005 and Georgina was put her bills in front of the house, 12 lines or whatever it was in front of the house, to have gender identity put in as a protected area in the Human Rights Act, and the government of the time pulled it because they were worried that it would push people away from voting for them and they might lose the election. Lost the bloody election anyway. And we didn't get that. And from then on, for 9 years, through the national government, I was on the Rainbow Communities Advisory Panel for Auckland Council, and I manipulated that situation to get the mayor, initially Len Brown, secondly the mayor after that, whose name has completely escaped me, to write letters to the government and say, this is what we need to happen. Are you going to change the Human Rights Act? And I had a conversation at the Big Gay Out with John Key. Do you know that transgender people are not covered under the Human Rights Act? And are you going to do anything about it? And his reply to me still rings in my ears. Yes, I'm aware of that, but, quote, it is not a priority for me. So human rights are not a priority to the Prime Minister of the country. What is? What's more important than equality and human rights? And of course now we've seen this government and lots of conversations with Jacinda about this very thing, and she was very keen on it and was wanting to push it in that direction, and gradually that's been the teeth have been pulled out of the changes to the Human Rights Act, and now the only people who are going to be added to the protection are religious groups. Now, who are the people who attack us most? Bloody religious groups. Yeah, so it's not actually working for us at all. So I don't hold out much hope. But when you talk to people individually, the Michael Woods and the Jacindas and the Chippies and people like that, they're all on our side, but they haven't got the courage to do anything about it. So if they haven't got the courage to enable me to be protected under the Human Rights Act, How the hell do they expect me to have the courage to even survive and live my life?
Yeah.
And when you have those conversations, they go, yeah, I understand. But what are you going to do about it? Nothing. And if we get a change of government, it'll be nothing again.
Yeah.
So where do I
Being
look?
supportive, but if it's baseless support, what do we do with that? You know?
That's it, exactly. Yeah. So where do I go for my support? Some days I go inside because it's not fair to unload the stuff that I'm going through on my family, and I know they do the same. So we try and keep an equilibrium in the family, where there are some things I can talk about whatever I want to talk about, and so can they, but sometimes we choose not to.
Yeah.
And in terms of Posey Parker, we didn't talk about that particularly much because I know what they think.
Yeah.
And we've seen it on the telly, and we know that what she's talking is absolute bollocks. But that there are people who want to hear that. And I always like to go and see where the money's coming from. And you look at where the money's coming from for things like Sean Plunkett's platform. There's Tova O'Brien, who's his left-hand person, going, actually, I agree with transgender people in this instance, and me going, what? You know, I was totally over Tova, but now I've sort of think, oh, okay, so you are a thinking human being, but there's, Sean Plunkett, and he's got a transgender brother, but he's still in there being vile. Where's that money coming from? It's coming from extreme right-wing aligned groups. Where's Posey Parker's money coming from? The same. Where's Counterspin's money coming from? The same. That's InfoWars, it's Fox News, it's all of that. Who, if you want to line up the enemies, there they all are.
Yeah.
And they've got lots of money, and they fund people like Posey Parker to go out there and create social disharmony. And she certainly did that.
Yeah. It's just so interesting. Her coming to our country was just mind-blowing to me because she spoke against, a lot of our indigenous people are trans.
Yeah.
And so she spoke out against those people as well, and it's like,
yeah, and
who are you to now colonize us again?
and she's exactly
Yeah.
the whole colonizing thing of that. And what else does she speak out against? Women's right to abortion, women's right to choose. She's not in favour of that. So is she here to speak for women because women can't speak up for themselves? I have never felt that women in New Zealand cannot speak up for themselves. They haven't been enough allies to get to address the real issues like pay equity and things of that nature. And we're not making any progress on that. We're not making any progress on domestic violence, the things that really affect women. And here we are going, oh, let women speak. It's
Doesn't add up.
somewhat short of a joke, but yeah.
Oh, could you please explain the term accidental activist?
Accidental activist. Oh, no. Yes, an accidental activist is someone who, in my case, I never set out to be an activist in our community, but right from day one, okay, there are things that need to be done, and I'm a doer. I can get out there and I can do it, and I can make a difference, and I'm going to be the catalyst that enables transgender people to be accepted within New Zealand society, and that started in 1998 with Agenda, a group called Agenda, and I was their Auckland coordinator for a couple of years, because all the people who'd been coordinators of Agenda before that had all gone, I don't want to do this anymore, because it became incredibly violent from within. Cross-dressers are essentially men who have get recreational sexual jollies from dressing like women, and they join clubs like that, and they park the truck outside, and they don't tell their wives where they are.
I think that's also another reason why we get highly fetishized as well.
Yeah.
It's because of yeah, people think that we get into this garb, I guess you could say, for sexual pleasure. It's like, no, I get into this because this is who I am.
Yeah, that's who I am, and this is what makes me feel good. Why do we wear clothes in the first place? I wear the sporting sort of clothes, because they make me feel good. They make me feel that I'm validated, and we all have a whole range of different types of clothing that we wear anyway. You look at the Black Ferns. They all dress like me, and I'm okay with that. I'm that fashion model for the Black Ferns. But, and there are, women who are, highly feminine, transgender women who are highly feminine, and they look gorgeous, and I think, I would quite like to look like that, but I don't. Yeah. And the truth is, I would look silly. My daughter didn't want anything to do with me when I first came out, because she had this idea that I was going to dress up like Dolly Parton. And we've had balloons down my top and stuff like this, and eventually I got her to come round home, and we just sat down, and she said, I just feel stupid now, because I really knew that wasn't who you are. You're not a drag queen. You're not going to go and, it's not about performance. Yeah. It's about who you are, which is complicated for an actor to shed all that stuff. And, so the other day about doing this, and about talking to Ryan Boswell, how do you do that so well, they said, which was really nice, the Ryan Boswell thing. And I went, that's really kind, because I don't find it easy. I'll throw you a Hamlet, I'll give you a Catherine from Taming of the Shrew, I'll throw a character to you without any problem at all. I know how to do that, and I know how to protect myself while I'm doing that. But when I have to present myself, it's a whole different ball game, because that the minute you step out of the frame that people see you in, either as a manager for an archery team or a karate practitioner or whatever, or a teacher, you step outside that frame, that people just want to cut you down. Yes. And how do you prepare yourself for that? Well, karate's enabled me to prepare myself for that. Yeah, and because, it's right behind me, the Buddha's there and the swords are there, and the whole nature of Bushido and the principles of Bushido have saved my life, essentially. But that's another, and that's happened within the context of our family. And now I'm getting to a point of going, okay, I'm 78 in a week or so, and the body doesn't do what it used to do, and it doesn't do what I want it to do, but I want to keep training. I want to keep doing that. So what that does is it gives me a thread through my life of saying, well, when I was 20, I could do this. When I was 40, I could do this. When I was 60, I could do this. Now I'm nearly 80, I can do this. And they're different things. Where is the authenticity through that thread? Where am I on that continuum? So that's that's an interesting journey too.
What got you into karate?
Finn.
Finn?
Yep, he's a monster. We got into karate through Finn. I went in to wake him up to go to preschool when he was quite young. He was about 3.5 or 4 or something. I went in and to wake him up, to take him off to daycare, which he absolutely adored. And I said, did you sleep? Your usual parental stupid question, did you sleep well? I don't sleep. Ninjas just rest their eyes. So this is this 4-year-old going, I'm a ninja. And where did you get that from? Because there's nothing in Kusla's or my background or any of what he was watching on TV that said he was a ninja. He wasn't a turtle, he was a ninja. And Kusla went, we'll have to find him a martial arts club. So we hunted around, and eventually she found Seido Karate at Morningside, who had a group of little kids, young kids, called the Brat Pack. And she liked the name, so do you want to go along and be part of the Brat Pack? Yeah. So we took him along, and he's always been gifted. Look at the trophies. He's always been gifted at sport. He's just doesn't matter whether he picks up a hockey stick or whatever he does. He's good at it. got a great understanding of dance, for example. He got a great understanding of himself and his body in space, which is sort of what sport is. So we took him to this, and every Wednesday we'd take him down, and he'd would put on his little T-shirt and do his karate training, and he was very good. He was very good at it. And some of the kids were pretty ordinary, but he was really good at it. In fact, when the big boss, Kyoshi Pat, came in to give them a grading, because they all have to have these gradings, he said, "Oh, what kicks do you know?" Oh, there was a front snap kick, and there was a kingiri, which is a kick in the groin. And, okay, anybody got another one? And Finn went, "Yeah, there's this one." And he just dropped down on one hip, put up a yokogiri off the floor. And Kyoshi Pat went, "Who taught him that?" Not supposed to teach the kids that. And Finn said, "Nobody taught me, I just know how to do it."
Wow.
And Pat just went, "You got to train with the adults."
Oh.
So he went and trained with the adults. It's quite a nice little story, actually, because we went every Wednesday afternoon, and it was good fun, and he was enjoying it. So he was invited to the Christmas class, where Sensei Santa comes along, and everybody gets dressed up in Christmas gear. So he got dressed up in a lion, fake fur lion suit, which lasted about 2 minutes, because they do a proper class. And so next thing you know, he goes in tears, and he came over and he took and he's standing there in his underpants. And I said, "Okay, well, do you want to go home?" And he went, No, I don't want to go home. I said, "Stay and watch." "Okay, that's good." And then about a minute later it was, "Can I go back in?" So he went in, and everyone else is in their Christmas outfits. He's in his undies, and he's kicking away, and he lasted the distance. So he was the only kid who was invited to the Christmas class. So then he got invited to the first class in the new year, which is called Kagami Baraki, which is the breaking of the mirror. That's where we train, and you're fighting with people, and sometimes people don't like it much, or you do something wrong and you end up with, I hate Brady and Brady hates me. And so breaking the mirror is going and shedding all that. You do a big, strong, hard class together, and then you have a hug at the end, and all of the animosities from the previous year are let go.
Okay.
Well, he was invited to this class, and by then he had his uniform and stuff. And you'll know this as a theatre person. 30 people in the room haven't seen each other for weeks, suddenly chatting, and it's all vital and vigorous and noisy chat, and we're sitting there, it's great, and Finn's out there sort of talking to people, and then Kyoshi Pat's out the front and he goes, "Line up." There's that theatre silence that you get from an audience. And Kushla's sitting next to me. She said, "I have to be part of this." Okay, so she said, "What about you?" And I went, "I'm joking. I'm 60. I've got a bung knee. I'm overweight, and I couldn't possibly do that. But as I said before, you make a suggestion to me, I'll give it a go."
Yeah.
So in the end, I said, "I'll do one class." And I didn't expect to get through it. And I had such mental clarity at the end of that class. I couldn't walk, but I had such mental clarity at the end of that class. I thought, "No, I want this in my life."
Amazing.
And that was the start. So that's how Finn got his parents involved in karate.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Because now you and Finn run a karate dojo. Is that correct?
Yes.
What is that like?
That's at his old primary school. It's at King's School. And Kushla and Finn and I, it was originally run by our sensei, and he runs dojos all around the world. Fantastic man. You'll meet him tomorrow. And we went along, and Finn changed styles from Seido that I talked about initially to Goju-ryu, because he liked Sensei's style of teaching, and he couldn't do both. There's just not enough time to train properly in two different styles, so he chose that style. And we changed too. We went to that style, and we'd go to the school when he was having his classes, and eventually Sensei Mei said, "Oh, you're black belts now, do you want to take over this dojo?" And we went, yeah, because normally that doesn't happen till you're a third dan. Where the sensei says, was that what they're doing essentially is giving you an income? And so we said, yes, we would. And we've been doing that, I think, for 11 years or something now, running that dojo. Now it's mainly, for a while it was Kushla and I, then it was Kushla, and now it's Finn's taken over responsibility for, that's part of his income stream. And that's been going for many, many years now. And it's established as part of King's.
Part of your fabric.
Yep, that's right. Wouldn't change it for the world.
Does it give you a sense of safety, I guess? Would you say, like, you are in any given time, because of your advocacy is so powerful, so that people can be in your face, can you be then centered as a person, knowing that you've got these functions that those people probably do not have?
It's not about being strong physically. Most people kick my ass now, especially younger people. But what it does, it gives you a sense of inner strength because of the 7 principles of Bushido, loyalty and respect, and all of those that I've got sort of tattooed on my arm. All of those principles are Buddhist principles. And I went from being this vacillating Catholic to being what I call a Buddhist. But in fact, I don't sort of have anybody that I worship or anything like that. But the teachings of Buddhism are the principles under which I run my life. And they enable me to go to places like you went to on Saturday. They enable you to do the same thing. They enable you to go there and to be strong, to suddenly find yourself facing a camera and to say, everything's on the table, anything you want to talk about. That's this part of you goes, okay, how's that going to play out? Well, it'll play out because I have respect for you, you have respect for me. I'm loyal to the principle of openness, I'm loyal to the principle of kindness, generosity, compassion, all of those things that are Buddhist principles. And what they do for me is they stop me being bipolar. So the whole bipolar, when I was initially diagnosed as manic depressive, I would have manic periods where I would just be creative like anything, and then I'd be, suicidal. Kushla controlled that initially. She would see these things coming, and she'd say, how are you feeling? I'm good. Are you okay? Yeah, why? Oh, you just did this and you said this. Ah, okay. So I'm heading towards a bipolar episode, depression, for example. And just simply knowing that somebody outside of me had seen that coming enabled me to start to see those symptoms as well. So the gap between depression and mania just disappeared. So I'm able to live a very settled life, even when you get crappy things happen like the weekend and like Posey Park. You go, how do I deal with this? Well, go into who you are. And who you are is a karate practitioner who lives their life by these principles. And that's probably the simplest way that I can explain it. It's not about, it's about believing things like the best fight you have is the one you don't have. That karate begins and ends with courtesy. That that's what the bowing's about. It's about I respect you and I'm being courteous to you. I shake your hand. That's why we respect in our Seido practice, for example. You line up in great order. So the person sitting on my right is senior to me. The person sitting on my left is junior to me. So if I've got something going on in my life that I want to talk to someone about, that's the person I talk to.
Right.
And if this person can do the same with me, so if suddenly this person here doesn't turn up for a couple of weeks, I get on the phone. Say, you okay? Oh yes, I broke my finger, but you are coming back. You will come back. Oh yes, can I come around and pick you up? You look after each other, and it's like a chain reaction.
Chain community almost.
Yep.
say.
Yeah. And the guys out the front have been, it's all about how long you've been training. And
Yeah.
the usual thing, I started to train and I thought, I just want to be a black belt. I just want to put that bloody belt around my waist and say, I'm a black belt at karate. And it wasn't going to happen. You're a white belt, and then you're a blue belt, and you're a yellow belt, and you're whatever. And it takes months and months and years. In my case, it took 15 years to get there. But I remember talking to one of my senseis early on, and he said, you just want to be a black belt, don't you? And I went, yeah. He said, do you know how to become a black belt? I went, no, tell me the secret. And he said, you come through that door. That's the hardest thing you will ever do, is you come through that door, and when you come into this room, you know it's going to hurt. The simple physical activity that you engage in for 2 hours or whatever it is going to hurt. And then you go out, and tomorrow night, you come back and you do it all again. And eventually, they give you a black belt. And it's sort of like, one step at a time. Stop trying to see it all in one bite. Break it down. Just keep coming, and you'll be fine. You'll get there. And our sensei, in October, took us outside and said, you guys are going to grade to Shodan, which is the first Dan black belt, at Christmas. And we went, yes, going to be a black belt. The thing is, he didn't tell us which Christmas. It was 2 years later we actually did it.
Yeah.
And I don't regret that, because in that 2 years, I stopped wanting to be a black belt and realized that the reason I trained was because I loved the training. I loved the working, I loved the people, and the pressure to have that silly bit of fabric around my waist, that pressure went away. So, yeah.
Is this a household of black belts? Okay. Duly noted.
Yeah. I am not in the least bit dangerous. Kushler is moderately dangerous, and Finn is very proud of the fact that he could kill you close up and kill you from a distance with his archery, and he only wants. You ask him tomorrow, what's the job you want more than anything else? He wants to be a state-sponsored assassin.
Right. Well, he's right on his way.
Yeah.
Okay. And your 2015 spin-off article,
Yep.
you spoke of that as being, let me make sure I get this right, being the year that trans went mainstream.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
That's when, we got Caitlyn Jenner.
Yes.
With all the Kardashian stuff that goes with that, the baggage of having been Bruce Jenner and having been a decathlete and a gold medalist at the Olympics, all of that stuff. And Laverne Cox was suddenly sort of there. I think that was the first season of Orange is the New Black, and suddenly we had, and other women too, a couple of academics. It was like, yes, this is great, here we are, we're visible. Because up until then, the whole thing about us was that we were invisible, and we wanted desperately to be visible. I was the front of the queue, let's be visible. And then we realised actually being visible is not necessarily the best way to be, because we're not, you know this better than I do, we don't go out and recruit. And that's the great fear that the public have, is that if we become too mainstream, too popular, then everyone will want to be like us. But in fact, the statistics haven't changed over the years, but we are more visible. That's the only thing. And visibility is not necessarily a good thing. So, we had to go through the whole thing of Caitlyn Jenner was going to be suddenly the person who was going to be speaking on behalf of our community, this right-wing Republican person with very, very strong views that were alien to most of us. But that she was named Woman of the Year. That money talks stuff. So that's what I meant by we went mainstream. Because here, of course, that was sort of towards the end of the effectiveness of Georgina, and the challenges that have, we've to celebrate her life and celebrate the things that she did. But we've never had another one. You look beyond the person and the personality and the fact that she was a great diva and all of those things. Where has the journey that she went on, which was so powerful, You know, Jules Dale's still one of my favourite movies. Where has that left us? Do we have any more protections under the Human Rights Act? No, we don't. Do we have representation in the Parliament? No, we don't. Do we have representation at local government? Hardly any. You know, we're nothing here. We've got our Rainbow Communities Advisory Panel, which apparently Mayor Brown is going to keep, but which has been pretty much, after the first couple of years, it's been less effective. One of the dangers, I think, in our community, and I'll probably get myself into trouble for saying this, is, and it's happened over the last week, is that you get the Posy Parkers saying, look at me, look at me, look at me, I'm over here, and this is what I'm saying. And our community goes, oh, we've got a couple like that too. And so we get people self-promoting, this is me, and I'm the great person in the transgender community. And, you know, you get a diva over here and a diva over there, and they cancel each other out. Yeah. And what happens to that person who has made a significant, made some significant statements? What happens to them now? Who's going to look after that person? Yeah. Because it's a quick fall from being in the paper every day and being on television every day to not being on television, not being, there's dangers there of having divas, and I would hate to think that that's how Georgina will end up being viewed, as a one-off freak that we've never been able to replicate. So we haven't actually capitalised on that wonderful journey. And pride's another thing there. You get people involved in pride who are not really interested in the community. They're interested in their place in the community, and it's a stepping stone to this parliamentarian position, or it's one of those things. And to get people involved in those community organisations who are there for the community and not there for themselves is quite rare. We can't function without allies. We're too small a community. Yeah. But sometimes, like the Posy Parker protest, attracts people who really are quite sincere about their support for our community, yeah. But they also turn it into a screaming fest and yeah. An opportunity to shout and that's in our DNA. Yeah. It's you go back to 1981, you go back to the Springbok tour. There were people there who was marching sincerely, but there were also people there who were just there for the fight. Yeah. And I got the impression that on Saturday there were people there who were our allies who really just wanted to be in a scrap. And that could be a verbal scrap, which, talking about people invading the rotunda and shouting and being vile. Some of the signs I saw were, without wanting to appear too conservative, I thought, well, that's not helping the cause at all. With what you're saying or how you're saying it, but how do you monitor that? I think there was a lot of monitoring went on. This is how we expect you to behave. You are there as an ally for our community. You've got to be peaceful. You've got to be all of these things. But people get wound up, and I got a bit wound up on Saturday morning by the Destiny Church people. I wasn't expecting them to be there. I didn't know that was happening, and their response to my family was so aggressive that I had a few things to say that I don't regret, but that in a different set of circumstances I wouldn't have bothered to say to a group of 12-year-old boys with banners about sexualising children. Not my greatest day, but we can't live without them.
Yeah, I can't say that was anyone's greatest day. I don't think. Yeah, I completely agree with you. We are so indebted to our allies, but sometimes you've just got to listen to the core of who you're supporting, and I don't think a lot of the women and the men and the others that were there wanted it to escalate that high. It happened, and that's absolutely fine. We were there to support, but yeah, if you're being an ally and you're not really listening to the centre of who you're supporting, then what are you there for?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there was a greater degree of purity from our allies in Whanganui-a-Tara, in
There was a
Wellington,
beautiful display.
and in
Yeah.
Christchurch, and in Dunedin, and
Yeah.
they were more centred around
And Tauranga.
Yeah, that's right.
They were also having their own, yeah.
of support and allyship. That was the sort of allyship that you go, yeah, that's what we want. Whereas in Albert Park, it probably got a little bit out of hand.
I also
I don't know
think
how
we
you
were
deal
in
with
the
that.
thick of it as well. Like, Posey Paka was right in front of us, and I think it would have been hard on anybody not to be angry by that. I think if you're distant from it, as these other towns were, they were able to make it more
Exactly.
something of a safe environment. But yeah, we not all of us, but some of us were just very angry that day.
And we had the catalyst of Posey Parker. They didn't have the catalyst of that focus of the anger.
Yeah.
For me, as someone who
Yes.
didn't go, she turned up to speak. She didn't speak. It was her choice, and then she left.
Yeah.
That should have been the end of it. You know, it didn't need to carry on beyond that. But I know from looking at some of the video that there were people there getting punched and beaten about by the Destiny thugs.
Yeah.
And you know, it's all very well for our our allies to try to be peaceful, but when those people come down and be as aggressive and as physically violent as they were, there's an aspect of you that wants to push back against that, and that's hard not to do. But yeah, allies, yeah,
We love them.
yeah.
Behave.
Yes, that's right. Yes. Look at us, full of our estrogen and full of our testosterone blockers, and we haven't got an angry bone in our bodies.
We're good.
That's right. Just watch us and be like us.
Yeah. Okay. We're just going to talk a little bit briefly about Mel Green,
Mm-hmm.
your dear friend. So tell me about the connection with Mel Green. And why did you decide to engage with a Christian fundamentalist such as them?
That's, you know, our lives are full of stories, and the stories sort of thread us together. And I always think that the more broad your stories can range, the more fun, the more richer your life becomes. I was in the restaurant at AUT one lunchtime, and somebody, I can't even, I think it was Michael Richardson, but somebody said, oh, you come over here, you've got to sit down, you've got to meet this person. So I sat down at the table and had lunch with this person, and we shook hands and we talked about some stuff, and at the end of it I thought, I've absolutely no idea why I had lunch with this person. And then I got a message from him, it was Mel, and he said, I'm doing this thing for Pride. And at that stage, Pride was very new. I think it was 2015. It was, we were in our second festival. And he said, and I wondered if I've heard a lot about your family. I wonder if you'd want to be involved in this. Because I've got a group of Christian worshippers, folk, who have no connection with the queer community at all. And they have attitudes to gay people and to transgender people. And I wondered if your family would come along and be part of a 3-day meeting with these folks, see if we could find some common ground. And it was called A Different Conversation. And I was quite fascinated by the idea, and I've got an obsession of saying yes to people, which Kushla will tell me that I should not do all the time. But
Thank you, fella.
no, you weren't one of them. But that's a fact, you know. People, you know, they always want a piece of you, and that's okay. I don't mind. She thinks I overdo it, but you know, that's a whole different matter. So I went home, and Finn was, this is 2015, 8 years ago. So he was 11, 12, and I told them what Mel had told me. and they said yes, they were happy to be part of it, which didn't surprise me because, that my family tell me not to say yes to everything, but they say yes to everything as well. And so I hung out with Mel for a little bit, and the conversation was simply, from my point of view, any trouble and we're out of there. And he went, absolutely. So we turned up on the Friday night to see this Australian film about a gay family and meet these folk. I suppose there were about 40 or 50 people in the room. And everyone, and on our tables there was, this is how you will behave. This was very specific. And you show respect for each other, which is what happened on that. And that was built on the Saturday. And Finn made a speech and was interviewed, and Kushla did likewise, and I did likewise. And the feedback was warm. We had no idea that you people don't have two heads and that you're not sort of going around spitting awful stuff. And it was really a healthy discussion. And on the Sunday, I'm pretty sure it was on the Sunday, Efiso Collins was there. And I'd known Efiso since 1998 when he was the student president at the University of Auckland, and I'd just started at the Maidman. So our paths crossed on different things, and I really liked him. I thought he was a really nice man. So here he is talking about Pacific religious organisations, and his dad's a pastor, and he's a very religious man with his family, and they were there. Fee was there, and the oldest one was there. So he talked about speaking with his father's voice, which is the first time I'd heard that term, excuse me. I'd not heard that term before. So he said, I'm not speaking what I believe, I'm speaking respectfully with my father's voice. So he had this conversation, and he was absolutely lovely. But I'd had a burning question for some time. How is it that Pacific Christian groups can have such a negative attitude to LGBT people and still look after their LGBT kids? How does that work? And he was able to explain from his perspective, because I had a number of Fafa friends whose families were wonderful. They didn't approve and they didn't agree, particularly with their gay men, but you're still part of the family. We're not going to do what a Pākehā family would do and kick you out on the street and not care about you ever again. So that was a really interesting start of a conversation, which is still going on.
What was his answer to that?
Just that we don't, he was actually quite confused by the question. You don't leave your family. This is family. You don't do that. And we love them in a good spirit of Christianity and Christian love. We love our kids, even though they might be doing things that we don't approve of. Which was a really interesting answer for this palangi to hear, because other families that I was working with weren't doing that with their Pākehā kids. So that was a really good point in that day, and that conversation from 2015 still carries on. We have coffee together quite regularly, and there was a lot of stuff during the election campaign about, he voted against marriage equality and he spoke against marriage equality, but people change. Yeah. He's walked hand in hand with me since 1998. And I treasure that friendship, and I've watched his family grow, and I've got to know his wife and that aspect of the family. I'm not drawn to the religion at all. I get stroppy every now and again, and people say, what's the worst thing that's ever happened to the Pacific Islands? What's the worst thing that's ever happened? It's the Bible, alcohol, disease, and the Bible.
Yeah.
and that doesn't necessarily please people to hear that, but it's, I think often the way Pacific religious groups have interpreted the Bible is a very simplistic and rather primitive way of looking at that. It's just a book.
Yeah.
Okay, I go down the path of religion, and you do not want me to go down the path of religion.
Yes.
Unless you want me to go down the path of religion, of course.
No.
No, let's not
Well,
do that.
I mean, I guess the other question is just with the rhetoric that Mr. Tamaki holds, does that not does that just really elevate your friendship and connection with Mel, because you wanting to hold on to those values, but
Never thought of it from that point of view, but if you frame it in that way, I guess it does, because I have absolutely, I despise what this the rich man's religion, based on one line in the Bible, and you give me all your money, and I'm quite proud to be responsible for pestilence and plagues and earthquakes and all the things that he blames us on, blames on us.
Yeah.
Quite proud of that. But I think the man is immensely dangerous, and the image of thugs on motorbikes and that physical pushing man up stuff, I think is incredibly dangerous to our community, and it doesn't have a lot of what I understand Christianity to be about amongst it. It's like Posey Parker is to women's rights what Donald Trump is to Christianity. You go, where's this, the Prince of Peace and the Christian belief in love? I know I've got a lot of friends, and Mel's one of them, who lives that.
Yeah.
My mother-in-law lives that as a very simple, faithful Catholic woman. She lives her faith. I can't understand how the people wave Bibles around and just want to kill people.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense to me.
There's that whole confusion of hate the sin, love the sinner, but in that you're just hating.
I've never worked out
everything.
what that even means.
It's still, even saying it out loud, thinking, what does that mean to somebody who's telling me every day that I create earthquakes?
Yeah.
I create earthquakes anyway.
We can make the earth move for anybody.
Yeah. Okay.
But I really think, because what you experienced was a direct result of the hate speech. Like, you were the victim, like you
Yeah.
were, and I just wonder if you could talk about that you were at the Q Theatre, you not attending the protest, you happened to be just a trans person with your family, and you were the direct recipient of this hate speech. Maybe
Yep.
you could just kind of...
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yes, the Vision New Zealand, which is the Destiny Church's political arm, which is sort of led by Hannah Tamaki, they had a protest in Aotea Square, which I didn't even know was happening, on the same day as the Posey Parker Talk Fest up in Albert Park. And we'd been to, Kushla and I had been to see Sogunga, which is a wonderful Korean puppet show at 10:30 in the morning. And we came out buzzing from this fantastic experience, and walked sort of a few metres down the road, and were confronted. Kushla went, "Oh, there's something happening in the square." And go, "Oh, look, it's the Destiny Church people." And then they were fronted on Queen Street. There was quite a big crowd, but the motorbikes were there and everything, and they were in the square. But they were fronted on Queen Street by 15 or 20 12 or 13-year-old boys with signs, stop sexualizing our children, whatever. I can't remember what any of them, I've got photos, but whatever, the other signs were. But the level of aggression of those children, the language that they used towards us, and we were just, they didn't know who we were. They didn't go, oh, there's a trans person, we must, attack that person. They just were attacking everybody with these signs, in your face with these signs. And I wasn't frightened by it, but I was shocked by it. And then to find out later that they'd gone up and, there's not much doubt that Marama was knocked down by one of the man-up men on their motorbikes on a pedestrian crossing. She hasn't said as much, but,
Oh, there's footage.
is there.
Yeah.
And that's frightening. But they went up to Albert Park and they got involved up there, and there is certainly footage that I've seen. I haven't seen the other, but certainly footage that I've seen of some of the men that I saw in Aotea Square fighting with people up at close to the band rotunda, and somebody getting punched, and that was blamed on the allies and the trans people. It had nothing to do with us or our allies. It was to do with the Destiny Church people.
I do know a lot of our people. Once she had left, they'd moved to this Aotea Square. A lot of our people to then go protest, and that was where a lot of the assault happened for a lot of our people, at least with the Destiny Church people who were pushing them up the street.
Yeah.
There's numerous videos to reflect that as well.
But we were just there. We were just members of the public,
Yeah.
leaving the theatre, and there were probably other people as well. It was focused on us because it seemed to be directed very, very firmly towards us. But I suspect it was anybody who was passing was getting these.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that shocked me most was the using 12, 13-year-old kids to spread a message of hate towards a group of people that they cannot possibly know anything about.
Yeah.
Just that the boss had said, this is what you should be doing, so
Yeah.
here's a whole lot of signs, go and create mayhem.
For a kaupapa that's around ensuring the safety of our kids is for their mind safety, they didn't really think too far ahead on any of it if those kids are out there doing what they did.
These were all young Maori boys. And I think, what is that? And that was awful as a person who's worked in education all my life, to see what has to be done to unpick and unravel that sort of indoctrination is pretty awful.
How would you summarize your generation's achievements in terms of trans rights?
I think we were the first generation, and I could be wrong, but I think we were the first generation who were enabled to come out later in life. A lot of the people that I've got to know over the years that are my age came out post-children, or post a marriage breakup or something, and they've gone, oh, at last I can just be myself. So there weren't that many role models for us from a younger generation. So growing up, I never met a transgender person till I actually came out. I didn't meet anybody who I could say, I want to be like that person. Or even, oh look, there's someone like that. When I suppose in my early 20s, going to those courses that I talked about at Lopdell House, and then going into the city and separating from the guys who went off to the strip clubs, and going to Mojos and going, these are not cisgender women, these are transgender women, and why am I drawn so inexorably to this place every time I come to Auckland? Why always come here or always go to Elfies. Why do I do that? Because there was no connection. I guess as I was growing up, there were instances where my parents would simply say, "Oh, those two lovely women down the road who flat together, and Jack, it's a pity he never married." The phrases that were used to sort of acknowledge. And my dad, I remember in one of my drugged hazes in the 70s when I went home before he passed away, I was in a theatrical phase, and I can remember I had beautiful blue velvet flares, and I had the makeup, the David Bowie makeup.
Oh, yes.
And I think my parents might have been a bit surprised that this person who left home as this rugby playing person suddenly turns back, having done a couple of plays, looking like David Bowie. And my dad taking me aside and saying, "I don't care if you're a homo, son, I'll still love you." Which has always made me think it wouldn't have mattered what had happened. My gender wasn't at the heart of why he loved me. It was me at the heart of, and my mum too. My mum never talked about it, but he just looked at me in all my makeup and glitter and 1970s tat, and thought, my son might be a queer. So it was, and to tell me that was okay, that was okay, was quite a powerful moment. Retrospectively as well as at the time, I remember thinking, "Oh, well, I'm not, but I'm David Bowie. What are you talking about?" But I suspect he knew a lot more about me than I knew about myself, even those days. Yeah.
How do you think? How have we progressed over the years? Do you think we're getting into a much bigger space as people?
I think the fight is on. I think, yes. I think people have become quite confused about what non-binary means. Certainly from a sporting perspective, that's a challenge. So, we've got, for example, in archery, we've made some progress. People can now register as not having a gender or being non-binary. But of course then you've got it's still a gendered sport. There's still male divisions and female divisions at international level. So how do you square that circle?
Yeah.
Well, you square that circle by saying what you were identified at birth as is your gender for this, unless you have engaged in some form of changing the nature of your gender through hormone replacement or testosterone blockers or T injections or whatever. Sorry, you're stuck with that. You can identify as non-binary. We will love you as non-binary, but from a physical point of view, you're a bloke or you're a girl.
Yeah.
So we haven't crossed that. We haven't crossed that bridge yet. We've, a lot of people still have difficulty with they and them, and with pronouns. Pronouns wind people up like nothing. And my pronouns are simple: she, her. They always have been. And you sure? You sure you're not they or them? No, I've got this voice, which is a male voice, which is essentially what I was born with, and I spent my life being an actor, and I'm not. What I've tried to do is shed all the artifice and to change my voice. No problem with people who do, and good luck to them. I wish I could do that. But to change my voice is to create another level of artifice for me as an actor. I don't need that. I don't need that. Some people do, and that's great. I have no problem with that. I have no problem with what other people do at all. But yeah, to go back to the question before, of how has it changed since I was young, as a young teenager. I remember when at the end of my sixth form year, a number of us rescued a young man called Jeff Skinner, I can even remember his name, who some of the other kids had decided was gay, and they'd got a whole lot of skipping ropes, and they were going to hang this kid. And, that sort of, I'd go cold when I think about that, as I did then, because I thought, what are they going to do to me if I sort of join the group that's going to get this kid out of the school and keep him safe?
Yeah.
What are they going to do if they find out that I did that? Are they going to try and hurt me too? And then it sort of did what kid stuff does, it disappears. But from that to the homophobia of rugby teams, not so much cricket, but I'm quite sure there were guys in the rugby teams that I played in who thought I was gay, but we didn't go there, we didn't talk about that, but we still don't, Campbell Johnson comes out sort of 10 years after his career's over, the only All Black who's come out. It was one of the things that came up at the High Performance Sport New Zealand Performance Summit a couple of weeks ago. I actually said in asking a question of a woman there who had worked with the Black Ferns during the time that when the women suddenly felt able to say, I'm going to have my wife and my children here as well, and I'm going to be publicly out, and this is me, and Portia Woodman getting married and having a 3-page spread in the Women's Weekly. I said, we've got one All Black. I said, you know who the All Blacks who are gay are, and so do I. But nobody's had the courage to go, this is me, and face the opprobrium of the community of, one, why didn't you tell us before? All of those ridiculous questions. So yes, I think on the continuum that you're talking about, things are better now. People are more able to come out. They are more supported if they do that. But do we have any national organisations? No, we've got gender minorities who do a good job. But really, that's it. Everything else is under the radar. It was one of the things the council, when I was on the Rainbow Communities Advisory Panel, the council wanted to talk. They quite seriously wanted to talk to our community. And how do we do that? Who do we contact? What are the groups? So there are no groups. You want to talk to people in my community, you find people like me who knows where they are. And, so we can't just go to this incorporated society which looks after trans people. No, we can't, because they don't exist. We've tried that, it didn't work. It's all under the radar. You want to talk to people in my community, you talk to people like me, you talk to people like Brady who know where they are and how to contact them, and it's all done under the radar. And they did that, to their credit, they did that.
What are your wishes for the community moving forward?
Acceptance, inclusion, kindness. I'm a kindness warrior. I'm a Jacinda fan. And I think we lost something. We lost our way after the first COVID lockdown, when suddenly everyone's talking about, kindness, and everyone's put teddy bears in their window, and, there was something happened. Our rivers cleared up, and we got things online about sort of strange animals running down the main street of cities who felt comfortable to come into the city again. I thought we were really progressing, and we've gone so far back. We've gone to Posey Parker. We've gone that part. But what we proved to me during those lockdown periods is that we can bloody do it. We can do that. So if we can do it for short periods of time, without destroying the leaders who take us there and guide us there and support us there. And so we've got things are better, but we've got a journey still to go on. We need leaders. We need leaders. And at the present moment, I don't know how you feel about this, but something that's really important to me is nothing about me without me. I've been promoting that idea for 10 years. Now, you want to talk about transgender rights, you want to talk about transgender anything to do with transgender people, don't talk for me, enable me
Yes.
to speak for myself. I'm quite capable of speaking for myself, and I'm one of a raft of people. So I have absolutely no patience with Max Tweedy speaking on my behalf. I do not want that. I want Max Tweedy to go, okay, who do we have on our board who's transgender, who can have an authentic voice here? Because over the last Posey Parker thing, there's a lot of voices being shouting out there, but there is not one of those voices that's authentically, Chanel Lau, not a transgender person at all, but in there taking a leadership role. Good on them for taking that role, but that's not a transgender voice. It's a strident ally voice, and we've got to be cautious about how strident we get when we're pushing an unpopular opinion. We've got to be rational, we've got to be respectful, we've got to be reasoned, and it has to be our voice, in the same way that it was Georgina's voice. Those people who are in our community who are capable of having that voice, there are quite a lot of them. I certainly don't insist that it's me who has the voice, but if you're talking about something that involves me, don't talk around me, don't talk over me, don't talk for me.
Talk to me.
Yeah. Let me have the opportunity to have a microphone on and a camera to look at, and I'll make a tit of myself just as readily as the next person, but it's an authentic voice. Authenticity is so important for us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Next.
Yes. Well, that's all the questions I have, unless...
Do you have any advice for families, parents who are, trying to grapple with trans issues with their kids? I think a lot of people are just confused about what trans is and how to navigate it. Do you have any thoughts around that? Or
I think it's the whole parenting thing is fraught for all of us, because the minute you parent a child, and I've been involved in this space for all my life as a teacher, some people seem to feel they know all about education simply because they can breathe in the back seat of a car. That enables them to speak, about education. It doesn't. But nor does it deny them the right to talk about parenting. And parenting, to me, is the skill that we all really need to have before we go down that path. The good thing about queer kids, the children of queer families, is that they're wanted. Nobody has a queer kid by accident. Okay, things happen along the way that rend families apart and stuff and ruin stuff. But what I've found on both sides of the coin is that I turn up, for example, tomorrow afternoon to college sport at Cornwall Park, and there'll be 400 young people there shooting arrows, and that's what they do. They're from their schools and they shoot arrows. And I will sit in my chair, and Kushla always puts another chair next to me, which is called the guest chair, and people sit in it. People come and sit with me, and it's the number of times, it would happen every week, that a parent will come and say, "Oh, you're Lexie. Yeah, I hope you don't mind me asking this question, but my daughter has just said that she actually is my son, and I don't know what to do about it." So that first, encourage people to make that first contact with someone they've heard about that they think they can trust. Now that could be anything, anybody. It could be, it could be a counsellor, it could be anybody, but preferably somebody with some experience and an authentic voice. And they ask me because they know about Finn.
Yeah.
And they go, well, how do we, what do I do? Because she wants, and they get he's all over the place. Talk to those people for an hour, and they will be using the right pronouns. They will have a respect for their kid that they didn't have before, that the journey that they're on, that it's a safe journey, that it's not a journey that excludes parents, and that basically, do you love your child? Yes, keep loving them. Keep loving them, keep looking after them, keep supporting them, and protect them from the crap that they are inevitably going to get and that you're going to get as well. And just be aware that the best thing you can do is have a network of people that you can trust. And I always say, and I am now part of that network, whether you like it or not, I'm someone you can come to, and here's my email address and here's my phone number, and contact me at any time. And in most cases, they don't. In most cases, that's enough to give them a starting point. But to hear somebody confused at the beginning of a conversation about what pronoun to use for their own child, to be authentic for the child, to go in the space of half an hour to an hour, to being absolutely adamant about that child's name is Axel, that child is a male, even though it was biologically female and the name was Sally. You know, and that's a really powerful thing that we can do as people in our community to really reinforce and bolster up those families. And you know, then the next question is, well, what are we going to do about Dad? Because Dad's not coping. Well, you've got my email address, so I happy to have a chat with Dad. I can put him onto some dads that he might want to, you know, this is where our networking thing works. Yeah. And that's a way of working that. Go to your school, make sure your school's supportive, make sure your school knows what pronouns to use, to introduce that to the kids. Kids will go, oh, Sally's Axel now. And she's not she anymore, she's he anymore. Yeah, okay, got that. Yeah. Because kids get it. Kids catch on real quick. So that's one side of it. From a personal point of view, being a queer family, a lesbian and transgender person with a straight son, as far as we know, how does that play out? Well, one of the things that happened was in the 150th anniversary of the New Zealand Herald, wonderful David Fisher, who's a fabulous journalist, contacted me and said, what we're doing is we're going to 150 places and we're going to interview 150 people who are significant New Zealanders, and I'd done some work with him, so obviously I was accessible to him, and we wonder if you'd like to be one of them. Go, yeah, that sounds really cool. And we followed it in the Herald, you know, as he worked his way down from Cape Reinga down through Whangarei, through Kaitaia, and I know it's the wrong order, but anyway. And he got to Auckland and didn't phone. So, okay. Oh, that's all right. You know, I don't mind. I don't necessarily enjoy being in the Herald that much. It's usually for negative stuff. So nothing happened. And then I got an email from him saying, the 150th anniversary day is on this day, and what the Herald wants to do is to highlight your family on the actual day of the 150th birthday.
Whoa.
So can we come round and make the video? They made a video and, you know, interviewed us for a day. And that's nice. And we had a lovely day. It was a really, really nice day. David's a nice guy, and you know, it sort of worked out really well, and they interviewed Finn and they talked to Kushla. And then it happened, and the two interviews they had were with Ed Hillary and us, which is a strange dichotomy there. And I looked at it online and thought, that's nice, that's quite a nice little article, beautifully written, as you would expect from David. But when I got to work, everyone at work had been looking at the actual newspaper, and it was a sort of a 3-page spread of photographs and stuff, which was really, really interesting. And I never thought about it again until about 3 weeks later. I was at King's School for karate, for our karate dojo, and one of the teachers came up to me and said, oh, have you had any pushback from, and I thought, here it comes, have you had any pushback from that interview in the Herald? And I went, no, not really, just some people going, oh, I saw you in the Herald, that was nice. Nice article, you know, things that people say. And she said, well, we had pushback at school. I went, oh, God, I never thought about that. How's this going to impact on Finn? And she said, yes, the school were approached by a couple of parents and wanted to know how they could explain Finn's life, because the kids were all going, oh, Finn's in the paper. How do we explain Finn's life and the Finn's family to our child? And the school had a phrase for it. They said, Kushla and Lexie and Finn are valued members of our school community. How cool is that?
That's beautiful.
And so I said to Finn, who hadn't told us anything, I said, did any kids talk to you about that article? Oh, yeah, quite a few. And what did they say? Oh, saw you in the paper. And that's as far as it went.
Yeah.
So, the great danger, which I fall into all the time, being a catastrophist, that it's all going to turn to custard.
Yeah.
Most of the time it doesn't. And when I
Yeah.
first came out, I thought it was all going to turn to custard, and most people didn't give a rat's, really. Yeah. And that hasn't changed, except that a lot of people now go, oh, yeah, I understand. Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
We are programmed that way, though.
Yep.
Like, always making sure wherever you're heading to is a safe space.
Yeah.
Like we unintentionally are programmed to think like that, I guess. But
I certainly am.
Like you said, it's 9 times out of 10, it's fine. But there's always just that one inkling of just being like, okay, prepare.
As I've got older, I am less likely to seek out those instances where the conversation could be marginal. I'm more likely just to stay somewhere, be there and be available. And a lot of parents, for example, at archery now know who I am. And if it's a conversation between a couple of parents, or we don't know what to do, go and talk to Lexie. At least then you're going to have a voice that's been there, done that, that will be warm and affectionate towards your child, which is all I want them to be.
They're so lucky to have you, because I remember that everyone's so lucky to have you in that space there, because there's not many people that are in any of these spaces anywhere that are able to support our kids in that particular way.
That's nice to hear you say that, because I don't think of it like that. I just think there's a job to do and you do it.
Yeah.
But I know that there are 2 transgender people in the sport that I'm involved with who would not put themselves in the situation of being so out that they could talk to someone in that way, which is really sad, because they're both fabulous people and could do it perfectly well, but they're not confident enough in themselves. And I think sometimes it's not a matter of confidence, it's a matter of I'm just too bloody stupid to realise, where the dangers might be. And, sometimes you walk into it and you cop a smack in the mouth for it and get beaten up by cops, like as part of my journey. And that's, I'm lucky, I'm privileged. Up until recently I've had a job, I'm in a family, I'm protected and looked after and cared for, and I'm middle class and I'm white. How many bits of privilege do you want? In our community, that's quite rare.
Yeah.
So there's a responsibility goes with all that.